5 years is a long time. 5 years is long enough for the grass to grow over the worst of it, long enough for the world to develop new patterns around the holes that were left, new workarounds, new rhythms, new ordinary days built carefully over the absence of the people who used to fill them. The world did not stop. The world never stops. It is one of the things about the world that Steve Rogers has come to understand. Over the course of a life that has included more than its share of things that should have stopped it, the world continues, not in spite of grief, exactly, but through it, the way water continues around a stone in the riverbed, finding new paths, building new channels, the river still recognizably itself, even as the landscape changes. 5 years. The support group meets in the school on Tuesdays. Steve sits on a folding chair in the gymnasium and listens. He is very good at listening. He has been good at it since before the serum, when he was small enough that people talked around him in bars and restaurants the way they talked around furniture, not noticing him, but also not excluding him, and he learned to pay attention to the things people said when they thought no one who mattered was listening. He is less good now at some of the other things. He is less good at making the 15-step plan feel manageable when the scale of what was lost is too vast for step-by-step to address. He is less good at believing, on some mornings, that we'll figure it out was anything more than something to say. He says it anyway. He means it anyway. A man named Garrett, who lost his wife and his daughter in the snap, and who has been coming to this group for 3 years, and who still cries when he talks about his daughter's voice, says, "How do you keep going? Really? Not the thing you're supposed to say. How do you actually do it?" Steve thinks for a moment. He is not performing the pause. The pause is real. This is a real question, and it deserves a real answer. He says, "I don't know if it ever gets easier, but I think the people we lost, I think they'd want us to keep going. Not because grief is wrong. Grief is the right response, but because they loved us, and love wants good things for the person it loves. Love wants them to be alive, to find things, to keep going." He pauses. He says, "That's the theory anyway." Garrett looks at him. "How long have you been telling yourself that?" Steve looks back. 5 years, he says, "and I still think it's true." He walks home in the October air with the specific heaviness of a person who has been right about something that hasn't helped him enough. The city is quieter than it used to be, still there, still itself, but quieter. You notice it in small ways. Fewer cars at the intersections, more green in the median strips that nobody's trimming, storefronts that haven't changed their windows because there's no one with the bandwidth to change them. The city endures. It is not the same city. It endures anyway. He runs in the mornings, 6 miles, which is nothing for his body, but he runs it at a pace that humans can keep, because sometimes a man named Danny runs the same route, and Danny needs a certain pace to maintain it, and Steve is not going to leave Danny behind. There is nothing requiring this. There is no regulation or assignment. He just runs at Danny's pace, because the company is better than the speed, and because 5 years of mornings in a world that lost half its people has recalibrated the things he optimizes for. He cooks badly. He has always cooked badly, from back when cooking badly in a Brooklyn apartment was at least consistent with the size and resources of the apartment. He cooks badly in a kitchen that doesn't fit him, and eats what he makes without complaint, because food is food, and the complaint would only be to himself. And he finds he has less patience for self-directed complaints than he used to. He is the closest he has ever been in 5 years to learning to stop. Not peace exactly, but something in the approximate neighborhood. He is in this approximate neighborhood when Scott Lang rings the doorbell with a van and a theory, and something that makes Steve's chest do something complicated, which is hope. He had stopped expecting it, not consciously, not as a decision, but somewhere in the slow adjustment to the new normal, in the accumulation of 5 years of Tuesdays and morning runs and bad cooking, the expecting had quietly wound down, not because he had stopped believing things could change. He had never stopped believing that, but because the specific hope, the snap reversal hope, the bring them back hope, had been run through every available analysis he could do, and every analysis had come to the same conclusion, which was that there was no mechanism, and without a mechanism there was no plan, and without a plan there was nothing to do but live with what was left. And then Scott Lang drives a van through a fence and talks about quantum physics. Steve listens. He listens the way he always listens to things that are outside his expertise, with the portion of his mind that is trained to distinguish between the shape of a good idea and the shape of wishful thinking. He has seen both in his life. He has been the source of both. He knows the difference, usually. This is, and he weighs the word carefully before settling on it, plausible. He goes to see Tony. Tony Stark has a house by a lake, and a daughter named Morgan, and a wife named Pepper, and a life that was built, Steve can see in the first 5 minutes, with the specific deliberateness of someone who knew how precarious it was and decided to make it as solid as possible anyway. There is a dock. There are good porch chairs. There are crayon drawings on the refrigerator. Steve watches him carry his daughter and feels the sharp edge of something that is not quite jealousy and not quite grief, but is somewhere in the compound of the two. Not for himself. He made his choices, and he is not the kind of person who revisits choices in the mode of regret, but for what was lost before it could be found. For the version of things where all of it was possible, the work and the life and the people in the next room. He tells Tony about the quantum realm. Tony says no, and he means it, which Steve knows, because he has known Tony for long enough to know the difference between Tony saying no as an opening negotiating position and Tony saying no as a complete sentence. This is a complete sentence. There's a daughter in the house. There's a life that was built against significant odds. He is not going to risk the sure thing for the possible thing, and Steve understands this at the level of complete sense, even as something in him does not accept it. He drives away from the lake with the weight of it. He doesn't argue. He leaves. He sits in the parking lot of a diner outside a town he doesn't know, with coffee he doesn't taste, and he thinks for a long time. He thinks about Bucky, who turned to ash in long grass, who said his name first, who was afraid last. He thinks about Natasha, who is somewhere running logistics for a world that lost half the people who need logistics. He thinks about Sam, who is somewhere doing whatever Sam is doing, which is probably something more useful than sitting in a parking lot. He thinks about Wanda and Vision and Peter Parker and all the others, all the names he knows and all the names he doesn't, the half of the world that went away on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. He thinks about what Tony said when he was finally willing to work. We'll figure it out. Tony said that. Tony said it to him, actually. We'll figure it out at a different kitchen table in a different crisis. And it turned out they did, eventually. He finishes the coffee. He goes back. It is Tony who figures it out in the end. This is the thing Steve had already known would be true, because Tony's particular mind and the particular problem were always going to converge if given enough time. And the only question was whether Tony would allow the time to be used for this. The phone rings in the lake house at 2 a.m, Steve suspects, and Tony is in the workshop with the math working, and whatever the exact moment was, the specific fraction of a second when the equation closed, the result is what the result is. Tony Stark hands him the shield. He just sets it on the table between them, in a moment that is also, in its quiet way, every conversation they should have had and didn't, every phone call that went to voicemail, everything that went wrong between two people who were better together than apart and couldn't figure out how to be together without also burning down the infrastructure. The shield on the table between them, Tony's hands retreating from it, and then Tony saying something that doesn't quite come out right, and Steve saying something back that doesn't come out right either, and both of them knowing that this is, for now, as good as it gets. It is enough. It is actually enough. Steve picks up the shield. The weight of it is the same. The weight of it is always the same. Not just physical weight, but the particular density of an object that has traveled everywhere he has traveled, that was there in the mud of the Ardennes, and the corridors of the Helicarrier, and a dozen other places that his personal history would rather not re-examine. The leather on the back is new. Tony has replaced the straps. This registers, and he doesn't comment on it, and Tony doesn't comment on him not commenting, which is its own kind of conversation. He straps it on. He breathes. He thinks, okay, the Time Heist is, on paper, the single strangest mission he has ever been part of. He has been part of missions that were strange. He has been part of missions that defied multiple categories of sanity. He has been on a helicarrier that turned out to be controlled by a dead Nazi. He once fought a robot that built another robot. He has fallen out of aircraft so many times that the statistical profile of this activity would cause most actuaries to retire early. The Time Heist involves a carefully modified van, a quantum realm, and specific return visits to some of the worst days of his life. He prepares for it the way he prepares for all things. He runs the scenarios. He identifies the variables. He tries, with the particular discipline of someone who has spent most of his adult life doing this, not to think too hard about the philosophical dimensions, because if you start pulling the thread on what it means to be standing in a moment you already lived through, you will end up somewhere that is not useful to anyone. New York, 2012. The city that he knows and doesn't know, both older and younger than the one he's accustomed to. The specific flavor of New York, as it was in the year when he was still working out what being Steve Rogers in this century meant. He remembers this year. He remembers it with the uncomfortable clarity of a year that contained a lot of things that happened very fast in a place that didn't quite feel like home. He walks through it like a ghost of himself. This is the thing no one briefed him on in the prep for this mission. You can run the tactical scenarios, and you can identify the extraction windows, and you can be as prepared as preparation allows. What you cannot prepare for is the experience of being in a version of your own past and watching yourself from the outside, and the particular quality of recognizing what you didn't know then, what you were carrying without knowing you were carrying it. The specific look on that face, his face, 4 years younger in calendar terms and 30 years younger in terms of what he was about to find out about the world. He watches the earlier version of himself move through the building with the confidence that comes from having just won something, and he thinks, you have no idea. Not a warning, not regret, just observation. The tenderness of being able to see a version of yourself before the wait arrived. The elevator. If you had asked him, before that day, to identify the single moment in all the operations he had run where the gap between what was required and what he wanted to do was widest, he would probably have named something with more obvious stakes. A battlefield decision. A call that cost someone something they couldn't get back. He would not have thought to name an elevator in a shield building in 2012. But this is where the gap is widest. He steps in. The men inside are the men he already knows, the faces he already recognizes from the files that weren't supposed to exist, until Sam found them on a hard drive 3 years later. He knows what they're planning. He knows what is in the briefcase. He knows everything except how to get it without a fight. In a crowded elevator, in a building full of people he cannot afford to alert. He stands there. The doors close. He feels the shift in the room, the specific shift that happens when people who are planning something realize that there is a variable in the room who shouldn't be there. He has been on the other side of that shift enough times to know what it feels like. He leans over to the man with the briefcase. He says very quietly, "Hail Hydra," and the briefcase is handed to him. He rides the elevator down. He rides it down, and he holds the briefcase, and he is doing what is required, and he is very, very careful not to think about what it cost to say those words. Those particular 2 words, in the building where Peggy Carter built something good, and where the ghost of Abraham Erskine's particular decency still lives somewhere in the walls. He said them because he had to. He said them because they worked, which is the most efficient solution, which is what he was there to find. He gets in the stairwell, and he allows himself, for approximately 3 floors, to feel it. Then he continues down. Later, the same building, different floor, different time band. He runs into himself. He is going to skip over the tactical details of this, because the tactical details, honestly, are not the point. The point is the experience of fighting yourself, not in the metaphorical sense that most people use the phrase, but literally in a stairwell, with the specific problem of knowing exactly what the other version of you is going to do before they do it. He knows the combination. He knows the tells. His past self says, through gritted teeth, and the specific expression of someone who is extremely annoyed at this unfamiliar, large man, "I can do this all day." He looks at himself. He says, "Yeah, I know." There is a pause. He uses the pause. He gets the stone. He gets out. He is on the roof of a building in 2012 New York with a PIM particle they don't have to spare, and a window that is closing, and he's about to go back. He's about to go back, and he looks, one time, one moment, at the city, this city, at this time, as it was then, before he knew everything it was going to ask of him. He looks at it. He goes back. 1970, Camp Lehigh. Steve Rogers, born in Brooklyn, raised in Brooklyn, who watched this base and what it stood for, become a large part of what he stood for. Standing in 1970 outside the building where, somewhere inside, the people he most trusted in his life are young and in the middle of their lives and have no idea what is coming. He is there for the Tesseract. He keeps his eyes forward and his footsteps quiet and his mission parameters clear. He is very good at this. He has been good at it for the better part of a century. And then he rounds a corner, and through a glass office window, in a corridor she is crossing on her way to somewhere else, in the particular efficiency of a woman who has been running things so long that running things has become the same thing as breathing. He sees Peggy. He stops. He is almost perfect at not stopping. He has run situations with considerably higher stakes and lower personal investment, and he has never stopped. He has trained himself with considerable intention over a very long time not to let the thing that matters most in a given moment get in the way of the mission, because getting in the way of the mission has costs, and the costs land on people other than himself, and that is not acceptable. He has been very disciplined about this. He stops. He stands in the corridor. He watches her cross the office, speaking to someone with the particular focused attention of a person who has 11 things to address and is addressing them in order of priority, who will not be deflected by the demands of things that can wait. Her hair is different. Her clothes are the cut and style of this decade, rather than his. She is young, not young as he has sometimes caught himself thinking of her in memory, soft with nostalgia and the specific softening that years do to what is stored, but young in the raw sense, actually young, the specific taut vitality of someone who has not yet lived the things that will change her, who is living the middle of her life without knowing it is the middle. She crosses the office. She doesn't see him. He lets her go. He stands in the corridor for 3 more seconds, maybe 4, and then he walks away. He does not go in. He does not knock on the door. He does not say her name in the hallway of a place she'll leave in 15 years, when she starts S.H.I.E.L.D., with the absolute conviction that people can be trusted to do the right thing if they're given the right framework. He does not change anything. He holds what he has seen, which is everything, which is the image of her alive and crossing a room, and completely fine, and completely unreachable, and completely fine. And he carries it back through the quantum realm to the present, and he keeps moving. He is very good at carrying things. They sit in a circle, and they plan the distribution of the stones. And in this particular moment, if you could step outside it and observe it from above, what you would see is a group of people who have each lost something they cannot get back, and who have decided to do this impossible thing anyway. And the quality of that decision is, in its quiet way, extraordinary. Not loudly, not dramatically, not with a speech or a score or a pullback camera shot. Just people at a table deciding. Steve looks around the circle. He thinks, this is what we are. Whatever else we are or aren't, this is what we are. He picks up his gauntlet. Natasha, he needs you to sit with this one. He needs you to sit with it the way he has to sit with it, which is completely, without moving away from it, without the comfort of narrative distance or the softening of time. This is not that kind of loss. This is not the kind that settles into something survivable on the normal timeline. There are losses that do that. You know them because eventually they become a permanent feature of the landscape. Always there, always known, but no longer having the power to stop you where you stand. And then there are losses that are different, that stay sharp, that will always stay sharp, no matter how long the time. She decided before they got to Vormir. He knows this, later, when he thinks it through. He knows it in the specific way that you know a thing about a person you have trusted your life to for years. Not from evidence, exactly, but from pattern and from character, and from the particular look she had in the Quinjet that he told himself meant something else at the time, because the telling himself was necessary. She decided. She made the calculation. She weighed the value of her own life against the value of what her life could purchase. And she made the decision the way she made every decision, cleanly, without sentimentality, with the complete commitment that was always either her most frightening quality or her most admirable one, depending on which direction you happen to be standing. He ran faster. He has thought about this. He is very fast. He is probably the fastest human-adjacent organism on this planet. He ran faster than he has ever run toward the edge because he is not willing, has never once been willing, to be the one who doesn't reach the thing in time. And she was faster. She was faster. He comes back to the others without her. The gauntlet is in his hands. The stone is in the gauntlet. The stone cost what it cost. He does not allow himself, in this moment, the full weight of it. Not because he is suppressing it. He knows what suppression looks like, and this is not it. But because there is still something to do. And the doing requires everything he has. And she knew that. Which is why she did what she did. The best tribute he can pay to what she paid is to see it through. He will grieve her properly later. He will grieve her for the rest of his life. Bruce snaps his fingers. There is a moment, a long, suspended, impossible moment, where nothing happens, where the world just continues being what it is, half empty, the sky the same ordinary blue, the compound the same compound, and Steve is in that moment, and he is holding very still, which is unusual for Steve, who is almost never still. And then, a bird calls. Not far away, not in the distance. Nearby, as though it has just appeared in a tree that wasn't occupied a second ago, which is exactly what has happened. A bird, returned from the same elsewhere that has everything else. He breathes out. He has not allowed himself, in 5 years, to believe all the way that this was possible. He has believed it was worth trying. He has believed it was right to try. But belief all the way, belief in the outcome, not just the attempt, is a different thing, and he has held that back, because some part of him knows what happens when you believe all the way in something, and it doesn't come through. The bird sings. He closes his eyes for 1 second. He opens them, and then Thanos blows a hole in the compound. He doesn't have time to be tired. He registers this with some part of his mind that is wry about it. He doesn't have time to be tired, so he will not be tired. And later, he can take stock of what this cost. And then there is no more time for registration, because there is dust everywhere, and the structure is failing, and there are people in there who matter to him. He finds them. He makes sure they're out. He does this in the ordered, methodical way. He does things when the adrenaline is running so high. That method is the only thing between action and chaos. He surfaces on a field. This field, like the one in Wakanda 5 years ago, is the before and after of his life. It is where things will be decided. He can feel it with the same animal certainty he felt it then. The sense in the skin and the bones that the axis of everything is here and now and this. He takes inventory. He has the shield. He has 2 broken straps on the shield because the building fell on it, and the straps are cracked through, but the shield is the shield. It cannot be broken in the way that matters. He has whatever is left in his legs and his lungs after the last hour, which is more than enough. He has himself, which has always been the only resource he could truly rely on. He stands. He looks at what's in front of him, the full army of Thanos, the complete assembled force of everything the universe threw at them 5 years ago and could not finish. Rows and rows and rows, and behind him, one man with a shield and 2 broken straps standing in a field. He thinks, Brooklyn. He adjusts the straps. He stands. He takes one breath. He begins to walk forward. Not run. Walk. The specific, deliberate walk of a person who is not in a hurry because they are not in a hurry, because the thing that is in front of them requires everything, and rushing changes nothing. And Steve Rogers has been walking toward things that are too large for one person since he was 17 and couldn't see over most people's shoulders. He is walking toward it. And then, behind him, through a sound that begins as a signal and becomes a symphony, the portals open. He hears them before he sees them. A sound that is layered and enormous, that is the sound of every cavalry that has ever turned to battle in the last hour of a long day. That is the sound of people arriving when people were needed, and every second of waiting was worth it. He turns. Wong, and then more, and then he sees Bucky. Bucky alive, returned, with both arms and the specific expression of a man who has missed a great deal and would like to know where to put it down. He sees Sam. He sees Peter Parker. And there is something in the kid's face that is so purely delighted to exist and to be here, which Steve knew about him before, but knows at a different depth now. He sees T'Challa. He sees Wanda, and the look on her face is not the ferocious look of Edinburgh. It is something past that, something on the other side of loss and through the other side of hope. The look of someone who has been to Vormir in her own way and come back with the knowledge of what things cost and the choice to stand anyway. They are all here, all of them returned. The ash that drifted in the Wakandan wind, gathered back into itself, into the shapes they always had, into the people they always were. He stands in the field. He is very quiet for 1 second. He raises the shield. He breathes in. He speaks 2 words. He doesn't shout them. This is the thing you need to know. Later, in whatever version of this is told and retold, someone will probably say he shouted them. He doesn't. He says them in the voice he uses when something is completely true and doesn't need amplification. He says them like breathing out. Avengers. And then, into the silence that follows. The silence of everyone listening, of the field holding its breath, of the army across from them going still, in the way that armies go still when something shifts. Assemble. Let the battle be the battle. Let it be enormous and irreducible, and full of the specific heroism of people who have decided that this is the hill, that this is the moment, that there is no alternative they are willing to accept. Let the moment surface the way they will. Sam with the wings. Wanda, alone against the one who took everything from her, choosing not to look away. The women of this team assembling their own line for one glorious moment, because of course they do. The universe has no shortage of people willing to stand. Peter, in the middle of it, keeping the gauntlet in the air with the particular ingenious desperation of someone who refuses to let the stone touch the ground, his voice cracking in a way that is simultaneously catastrophic and alive, and Steve moving through the center of it, not untouched, not uninjured, not anything as clean as that, but moving, always moving. The Brooklyn kid who didn't know how to stay down, who still doesn't, who has built an entire life on the premise that the next thing is always findable if you're willing to keep looking. He moves. He does not think about dying. He has thought about dying plenty in the relevant contexts, and it has never been a useful thought. He thinks about the next thing, and the next thing, and the next. Mjolnir. He has known for a long time. He has known since he sat in a room in the middle of a party that felt simpler than it was, and felt the handle stir in his hand, and made a quiet, considered decision to let it be. He has known, in the way you know things that you're not ready for, not because you lack the capacity, but because the time is wrong, and the right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. He picks it up now. He picks it up in a field that should be lost, against an enemy that should be undefeatable, with 2 broken shield straps and a body that has absorbed more impact in the last hour than most objects absorb in their entire operational lifespan. He picks it up. The lightning comes first. Before the swing, before the moment, the lightning, because that is what it does with him. That is the acknowledgement. The weather saying yes. You. The answer was always you. It comes down his arm and through him and out into the field in a way that he doesn't have a word for except right. Not comfortable, not easy, right. The specific rightness of something finally being used for what it was always for. He looks at Thanos. Thanos, who 5 years ago drove him into the ground. Thanos, who was surprised for 1 fraction of a second, and that fraction is the thing Steve has held on to, more than he has ever admitted to anyone, because it was proof. It was proof that he registered, that in the calculation of everything in the universe, the kid from Brooklyn was something that had to be accounted for. He swings. There is a moment after the reversal, but before the final fight, when he has to hold the line alone. The army is still coming. The portals haven't opened yet. He is the only thing standing between what remains of the compound and the full assembled force of everything Thanos has brought. He adjusts the straps. He stands. He breathes. He is afraid. He wants to be clear about this, not in the moment, because the fear does not surface to the level of thought in the moment, but in the telling. He is afraid. He has always been afraid in these moments. The serum did not fix fear. It fixed the size of the body and the ability of the body to survive things that should kill it. And those are useful features, but they do not address the entirely reasonable anxiety of standing in front of an army by yourself with a cracked shield and a borrowed hammer. He is afraid, and he stands anyway. This is, in some ways, the only story he has ever had. The afraid part and the standing anyway part. The kid in the alley in Brooklyn, too small to win, standing anyway, because the alternative was to agree with the person who said he should leave. He never agreed. He has never once agreed. And all of the things that followed, the serum, the war, the ice, the century, the things he has fought and lost and found and lost again, all of it has its roots in that earliest decision. The stubborn, unreasonable, entirely sincere refusal to be someone who walks away. He stands. He waits for the portals. Tony. The stone is in the gauntlet, and Thanos says, I am inevitable with the particular satisfaction of someone who has arranged every variable in the universe to support this conclusion, and the conclusion is airtight. Tony says, "I am Iron Man," and snaps his fingers. Steve has thought about Tony's hand in the quiet that came after. He has thought about it a great deal, the specific image of it, the metal gauntlet, the 5 stones, the fingers closing. He has thought about what Tony knew in that moment, what Tony understood about the cost, which was everything, which was the whole life, the lake, and the dock, and the good porch chairs, and Morgan calling him Daddy and Pepper, and all of it, and which Tony paid without hesitation, not without fear. He is not saying Tony wasn't afraid, but without hesitation. This is the thing he has thought about in the quiet, that Tony Stark, who spent most of the time Steve knew him building armor against exactly this kind of cost, who built suits and bunkers and protocols and safeguards and the enormous, ingenious architecture of self-protection that is, in its own way, a kind of masterpiece. Tony Stark chose, at the end, not to be armored, to be open, to be the one who paid. He did not hesitate. He does not tell this to many people, because it comes out wrong when he tries to explain it. But that moment is the thing he returns to when the world asks him what heroism looks like. Not the lifting of the hammer, not the shield, not even the getting up from all the alley floors over all the years. The hand that closes on everything and snaps its fingers. Steve catches him. He holds Tony Stark in a field that is finally, on the right side of a war that has cost more than anything should have to cost. And he says, "We won." Tony looks at him. He says, "Took you long enough." His eyes close. Steve stays with him, there on the field. There's no tactical reason to stay. There's nothing to be done. He stays because this is one of the things he knows how to do, to be present to the thing, to not look away, to stay in the room, even when staying in the room is the hardest available option. He stays. He stays until Tony is gone. Then he stands. Then he keeps going. Continuity. Note, the battle is won. Tony is gone. Natasha is gone. Bucky is back, alive, returned, standing in the field as the dust settles. Steve held the line alone and the cavalry came. He picked up the hammer. He said the words. He is still here. Kshalevan opens at the funeral.